Hey everybody, how's it going? It's Jiva and welcome back for a new video. So once again, I am so excited to be here because I'm actually back with yet another autumn book recommendations video. But this time it's gonna be a little bit more niche because I'm gonna be talking about some witchy books that I think would be really good to pick up this autumn season, especially since we are currently in October and Halloween is actually coming up. So if you're looking for some witchy books that you would like to read, then hopefully you can actually get some inspiration and some recommendations from this video. So yeah, without further ado, I'm just gonna start in with the list because there are quite a few books to talk about. And this time I'm actually gonna start the video with a few books that I have already read. Now, interestingly enough, my interest in witchy books has been growing exponentially, but I'm sad to say that I haven't actually read that many witchy books, especially witchy books that I would enjoy and recommend. I have read some that were like less inspiring than others, I guess you could say. But the four that I have here right now that I own physically that I would definitely highly recommend to anybody who is interested in witchy books are these four. So starting off, we have here Cackle by Rachel Harrison. Now this is kind of like what I call kind of the adult witchy book, even though all of these are technically adult witchy books. But this one feels especially adult in its themes because we deal with a woman who ends up being broken up with by her long-term boyfriend, and feeling kind of lost, she decides to take up her life and move to a small town where she actually takes up a teaching job and meets a lot of new interesting people. One of those people being this very kind of at first scary seeming lady who seems to have some magical abilities and a special connection with spiders. Yes, spiders. But at the same time ends up being a woman who inspires our main character to find herself again, to figure out who she is, who she wants to be, and that kind of stuff, like all the good stuff. I feel like this book is a perfect blend of some very like real life serious topics and a little bit of cozy times with some like kind of horror-ish magic witchy stuff as well mixed in there. So I think it has a little bit of everything, and it would be a very good pick for Halloween if you're looking for something that's both cozy and scary at the same time. So yeah, would highly recommend Cackle by Rachel Harrison. Plus, Rachel Harrison's writing is just amazing. She definitely knows how to tell the story. Like, she is a masterful storyteller. So yeah, would highly recommend Cackle by Rachel Harrison. And then moving on to the next book that I've read, that is The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches by Sangu Mandana. Now this book is for all of you looking for a cozy witchy read. In this one we actually follow our main character called Mika Moon, and she is a witch. But the world isn't really supposed to know that she's a witch because witches have been living in secret this whole time. Like, both Mika Moon and her coven have yearly meetings, but they definitely don't advertise that they're witches, except that Mika Moon kind of does advertise that she's a witch, but she does it kind of jokingly because she does like online content of like doing spells and potions and stuff like that, but it's all like kind of jokes. You know, she doesn't really expect anybody to take her seriously. But somebody on the internet ends up taking her seriously and going so far as to offer her a job of becoming a mentor to these 3 young witches who live in their care. And so Mika Moon, in some moment of insanity honestly, decides that she's gonna take up the job and moves into this house with some very interesting people and ends up becoming a mentor to 3 young witches. So yeah, it is such a cozy, magical, just very warm time, I guess is the best way I can describe it. This book genuinely feels like a warm hug, and I would recommend this one all year long because you can obviously use a warm hug all year long, but if you genuinely want to get the most out of the book, then I would definitely recommend reading it during, you know, one of the cozy seasons. And then the last 2 books, or I kind of want to say 3 books because I have read 3 books in the same nature as these, but I only own the 2 of them. So that is The Ex-Hex and The Kiss Curse by Erin Sterling. And I just want to quickly add Hex and the City by Kay Johnson, which I just recently listened to on audio. And they kind of are in a similar line of just being these very chaotic but fun rom-com witchy reads that kind of center around like Halloween time, which is especially the case with the first book. So here we kind of follow a couple of cousins. Each book is dedicated to one of the cousins and their love interests and their witchy endeavors of trying to protect their town from some very dangerous magic that goes out of control. Both of these are so much fun and are so fast-paced, and the romance is quite well written, but at the same time it has this like very chaotic magic energy to the plot that is just like, I don't know, there's something about these books that just pulls you in and spits you out at the end, and you don't even know how the time passed in between, except that you were really enjoying the story and what was happening. I guess that's at least how I would describe my experience reading these books, and it was a lot of fun. And for sure the same can be said for Hex and the City by Kay Johnson. That book was also incredibly fun. So yeah, those were the books that I had read so far, and I actually also categorized the rest of the books on this list kind of based on how I just described these books. So we have some books that are kind of similar, I feel like, in tone to Cackle. Then we have some who are again in tone similar to the very secrets, you know, the Irregular Witches. And then there's gonna be quite a lot of books actually that are kind of similar in tone to the X-Sex. So you have like the chaotic rom-coms is what I like to call them. So yes, without further ado, I'm gonna jump into the list now of the books that I haven't read yet but that are on my TBR and just sound incredible, and I hope you get some recommendations from those as well. I just need a sip of my tea because I actually have a cold, which is why I have this tea here. It's not just for aesthetic reasons. I genuinely need it to hydrate my throat, but there's also a black cat on here, which is black cats kind of go hand in hand, right? So yeah, I have my tea and my black cat here. Okay, now if you're ready, we're just gonna jump into the rest of this list. Okay, so I want to recommend you a book. If you read Cackle by Rachel Harrison and enjoy the aspect of the story of the main character sort of grieving her past relationship and deciding to run away from the grief to this small town and there discovering magic, which she also kind of uses to distract herself from thinking about her past and thinking about her present. And I think you might actually be interested in the story called Witch of Wild Things by Raquel Vasquez Gilliland. Now in this story we follow this young woman. She's called Sage Flores, and once upon a time one of her ancestors actually angered the gods, which resulted in all the women in Sage's family being cursed with magical ability, which honestly doesn't sound like a curse at all, but okay. But unfortunately, 8 years ago, Sage lost her younger sister, and ever since then she's kind of been running away from her family and their gifts. Something though now spurs her into going back to her old town, going back and taking back the job, working for her family's company, and she also starts practicing her magic again, which actually involves some sort of like plant magic. So she jumps straight back into it, she slips into it very comfortably. And she also ends up meeting her ex-boyfriend again, all the while actually being haunted by her dead sister's ghost. So there's a lot of parts to the story that sound very interesting, but I'm especially interested to see what exactly this plant magic has to do, whether it is actually connected with her sister's death, whether her family actually had something to do with her sister's death, or what's going on. I just want to know more of what happened to her, what happened to her sister, what's happening with her family, what are their magical abilities. It just sounds like the story is gonna have a lot of layers, and so far it's actually been getting pretty good reviews. So people love it. Maybe you'd be interested in that as well, so I thought I'd actually include it on this list. And I also have a story here that's more of an honorable mention, to be honest, because it's like a short novella that includes witches. It's called Hex by Jenni Fagan. And in this one, we actually follow a couple of witchy characters. We have one that's from the present time, but she ends up traveling back in time to the 1591, so back to the 16th century, and into a prison cell where we have a woman who was accused of being a witch and is actually awaiting her execution. And so the two women kind of sit down together and talk about what exactly happened to the old witch, why is she there, why was she accused of witchcraft, is she really a witch, what's happening. But there's also this part of the story that actually reflects on how those old witch hunts still reflect today in how women are judged and you know, kind of the consequences of that in today's time. So it sounds like it's gonna be really interesting. It's a really short story, it's only like 104 pages. But I've seen some really good reviews about it. Another book I want to recommend you that's more on like the serious side of these witchy book recommendations is called The Forgotten Witch by Jessica Dodge, and this one sounds once again interesting. It again reminds me of Cackle in the sense where we kind of have this magical force, but you're not really sure whether it has your like good intentions at heart, whether it's actually gonna capture you and keep you and never let you go, or what's gonna happen. there's kind of like this eerie feeling to the magic part of the story, and I am really excited about it. But basically in the story we follow a woman, she's called Helen Kent, and she's definitely more of a stay in your comfort zone sort of person, until one day an online purchase actually brings her to Scotland, to this cottage where she's staying, and ends up discovering these very old journals that seem to belong to a witch who used to live here in the 16th century. And by discovering these journals, I think Helen ends up being trapped in this like magical trap, magical war between some evil and some good forces, and she doesn't really know how to go from here. So with the help of some like well-meaning Scottish neighbors, she ends up having to fight this off. And this is the part where I'm very intrigued by it, because the main character is kind of like trapped in this magical place where she doesn't know whether the magic is actually gonna eat her up. What exactly is gonna happen? Who was this witch that used to live here? Why did she leave these journals behind? What's this magic now that's, you know, being unleashed on the world? What's gonna happen? I don't know, because even though the synopsis doesn't really give you much insight into what the storyline is actually gonna be, there's like a certain vibe about it that's kind of spooky and scary and could be kind of horrorish. So I'm excited to see what's gonna go down in the book. So if you're on the lookout for some more like cozy witchy reads, then I have some recommendations here for you. And I'm gonna start it off with first one, which is Cider Coven by Vanessa Abigail Lambert. First off, guys, let me show you the cover on this book, because that is the most fall book cover I have ever laid eyes on. Like, it has the color scheme, it has the apples, it has the witchy things. Even like there's a little symbol on the apple, if you can see that. There's a moon, there's the hats, like everything about this just screams autumn to me. It's kind of like if you were to pull autumn out of the air and put it on a cover, this would be exactly it. It has all the elements. And it's kind of lucky also that the synopsis also sounds amazing. So once again, we follow a family of witches, or like a family of people with some magical abilities. And this time we actually have three cousins who, when they were younger, they were in an explosion of nature-infused magic. And ever since that happened, their parents have kind of kept them separated at their each individual places throughout the country. Until one fateful day when all three cousins end up being involved in like separate near-death experiences, which is very traumatizing. At the same time, it actually awakens something inside of these three young girls, something magical, and so they end up traveling back to where the explosion in their childhood first happened, which is at their grandma Lydia's orchard. So they travel back to their grandmother, where their grandmother is actually waiting for them with her arms wide open, ready to be there and guide them throughout this magical experience of them actually discovering their powers and learning how to use them. It sounds like it's gonna be absolutely amazing. You know, it's gonna be set at an apple orchard, which sounds magical and autumnal and perfect. We're gonna have family, we're gonna have friendship. There also mentions there's gonna be forbidden love. We're gonna have the family, the grandma, I don't know, it sounds so adorably heartwarming, and I am really excited. Another cozier book I wanted to mention is called In the Shadow Garden by Lish McBride, and I'm actually gonna read you the synopsis of this one. So it says, 3 generations of witches must discover where their magic went wrong as secrets resurface that could solve a 20-year-old mystery in this riveting debut, perfect for fans of practical magic and midnight at the Blackbird Cafe. There's something magical about Yarrow, Kentucky. The 3 empathic witches of the Haywood family are known for their shadow garden, from strawberries that taste like chocolate to cherry tomatoes with hints of basil and oregano. Their magic can cure any heartache, and the fruits of their garden bring a special quality to the local bourbon distillery. On one day every year, a shot of Bonner bourbon will make your worst memory disappear. But 20 years ago, the town gave up more than one memory for the year. They forgot an entire summer. One person died, one person disappeared, and no one has any idea why. As secrets from that fateful summer start to come to light, there must be a reckoning between the rival Haywood and Bonner families. But the only clue Irene Haywood has is in her tea leaves. A stranger's arrival will bring either love or betrayal to town. So that sounds, once again, kinda witchy, mysterious, and I am here for it. Like, I especially love the idea of the setting. We have a magical garden, and we have 2 rival families, a mystery. I don't know. There's something about this that just sounds so cozy to me. Is this a cozy mystery? Oh my god, I just realized. This is probably like a cozy mystery, right? I've heard people talk about cozy mysteries, but I've personally never read them before. I don't know, honestly, the premise just sounded kind of cozy and mysterious, and I thought some of you might actually be interested in this one as well. So yeah, that was In the Shadow Garden by Liz Parker. The next book I want to recommend is actually for anybody who's a fan of the found family trope. I have here a book called The Orphan Witch by Paige Crutcher. So here we follow a young woman, she's called Persephone May, and unfortunately she was abandoned when she was a child by her parents. And so all her life she can remember moving from one foster home to another, never really being in one place for very long. Because whenever she's around, strange things start happening, like the weather changes very quickly, inanimate objects start to just hover around and stuff like that. So Persephone has made it a point to not get attached to any one place or to any one person. Until one day, unfortunately, a very public accident exposes her powers, and so she has to flee, and she flees to this island called the Wild Isle, whatever that is. And when she actually arrives there, she discovers that her magical powers might actually be the answer to some problems that the citizens there are facing. So it says here in the summary, she finds answers, family, and home at this Wild Isle. So yeah, like I said, it just sounds like it's gonna be a very cozy time. I like the idea of Persephone May just coming to this place and meeting people who finally accept her for who she is and even accept her somewhat chaotic magical abilities. It just sounds like a very heartwarming story. I do have my expectations set on low because unfortunately so far the book has been getting mixed reviews, but still something about the story sounds very charming and it definitely has piqued my interest enough to actually be interested in jumping into it. So I thought I would also share with you. And another cozy one I recommend you is called Witches Get Stuff Done by Molly Harper. And this one specifically I'd like to recommend to anybody who read The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches and were charmed by like the romance aspect of the story, but also with like the coven aspect of the story, because I think this story might actually have some of those elements as well. So in this story we follow this young woman, she's called Riley Everett, and she just learned that she is actually a witch after her great aunt has passed away and left her Victorian mansion that actually ends up being haunted once Riley arrives there. Fortunately for Riley, she does discover her great aunt's like old journals that document how like their magic works and how to use their magic and stuff like that. So even though she knows nothing about magic, she just learned she's a witch. She's actually using those journals to help her learn and understand more where her powers come from and how to use them. And because she doesn't really want to do this alone, she kind of seeks the help of some of the local women as well that she meets in this new town where she's moved to. And to add a cherry on top, she also ends up meeting the local head librarian. He's called Addison Held, and Addison has actually always been fascinated by the house that Riley has inherited. And so he's kind of trying to butter Riley up to allow him and go inside the house so he can explore and look around and stuff like that. So yeah, once again, I just have a feeling this book is just gonna be a very warm and very cozy and comforting story, wrapped in a nice little bow with a little hint of romance and some magic and a small town and a haunted house. You know, all the buzzwords for a perfect autumn witchy read. And I think this is gonna be a good one. So yeah, that was Witches Get Stuff Done by Molly Harper. So if you're a fan of books like The Ex-Hags, The Kiskers by Erin Sterling, then I have some books here that are kind of in similar line as that. So like the silly, very fast-paced, feel-good, witchy rom-coms, which you can mostly read for like enjoyment purposes. I have some perfect books that might interest you. And some of them are even set around Halloween Town, so if that's something you're looking for, I have some of those books here for you, including this first one, which is Playing the Witch card by KJ Dell'Antonia. And this is sort of like a multi-generational story. So we have the main character, we follow her mother and her daughter. So the main character is called Clare Hardwick, and there's two things that she has learned in life: that she cannot rely either on love or on magic. Both in her past have actually let her down, and so now she's guarding against both of those. Now trouble starts when she actually inherits a bakery from her grandmother, and for some reason she thinks it's a good idea to decorate some of those baked goods in the same fashion as tarot cards. And what she ends up doing is actually infusing those cookies, I believe, with the magic of the tarot cards that, you know, her family owns. And so that magic ends up wreaking havoc on her life, her town probably, the life of her daughter and the life of her mother and the two of her exes. So there's a lot of people who are involved in this magical chaos now, and you know, Clare must navigate that chaos, basically. That's what I get from the synopsis. I honestly don't need to know more. I just know it sounds like fun, and it's actually a story that has tarot magic, which I've never read before, so I'm interested to see how the author is going to weave that into the story as well. And yeah, sounds like a witchy good time, you know? Also set around Halloween time is a novella, and this one is called Spookily Yours by Jennifer Chipman. Now this is a novella, but it still has 233 pages, so I hope this is gonna be like a well-written novella. But basically we have a young woman who's a witch, and she ends up discovering that her cat is a demon. And while she's trying to like save the demon from being a cat or something, he needs help to break a curse, basically. She ends up falling in love with the demon, because of course, what else would you do if you meet a demon? So yeah, it sounds like it's gonna be just like a cute little thing. So yeah, I love the idea of this story. It reminds me of that one cozy series that keeps being recommended, like with a really long title, like something I accidentally saved the demon. That one time I got drunk and accidentally saved a demon. Is that what it's called? For some reason this book gives me vibes of that one, but with Halloween or something. So yeah, that's kind of like what my mind has been stuck on, and I have been really looking forward to actually checking it out ever since. And another witchy rom-com that's set around like the Halloween time, and it has some like Halloween themes going on. This one is actually a college new adult story that involves an athlete, which is something I didn't know I need in life until I actually found this book. So there's a witch and an athlete who are enemies at first, by the way, but end up helping each other and falling in love. That is a story I did not know I needed in my life, but now that I know it exists, like I need it with my whole entire being. So this book is called Bewitched by You by Kendra, Mase. And I'm actually gonna read you the synopsis once again because I'm so lost whenever I try to summarize this. So I'm gonna read you the synopsis. I'm sorry again. So it says, Luella Pierce is having a mid-witch crisis. Her best friend is top of her class and currently on a fast track to land her dream job. Her coven members have all found their passions in life and are excited to start their next chapter. Even her arch nemesis and Barnet University's star football player Ryan Gardner has future plans. Sure, they're to become a permanent nuisance in her life, but still, everyone else seems to have life figured out except her. Lou's big plans? Procrastinating the future by throwing all her energy into creating the most fantastic time-high Halloween celebration Barnet University has ever seen. That is, if she can convince the student council she won't perform any satanic rituals. But when Ryan sustains a career-ending injury and Lou receives an offer from her sweet yet meddling coven matriarch that causes her to rethink everything, Lou also begins to question if the strongest magic may be taking a chance on love and herself. You see what I mean? We have so many promising elements to the story. We have the enemies to lovers romance, we have some witchy good time, we have a main character who is lost in life and doesn't know what to do with her future, which honestly at the moment I find very relatable. And we have a coven of witches, and we have a college setting. And tell me that doesn't sound like a very magical read. I have a couple books on this list as well that I didn't really intend to go into much detail in. I just kind of wanted to mention them to you in case you'd be interested. One of those books is called Witch You Weren't Here by Emma Jackson, and it's basically about these two witches. We have a woman who's a witch and a guy who's a witch being stranded after like a magical accident happened during a play ride, and so they kind of have to work together with their magic to try and figure out what's wrong and make it home in time for a wedding. So it sounds like that could be like a good time. And then another couple that I wanted to mention are Not the Witch You Wed by April Asher. So this is a fake relationship between a witch and a werewolf, or like a wolf shifter. I guess they aren't called werewolves. But the reason why I don't want to go into too much detail is that they don't really seem to have any like autumnal elements to them. They're just witchy books. So if you're just looking for like a straight up witchy read, then you actually might be interested in this one. And then another one is called A Little Too Familiar by Lish McBride. And in here we once again have like a witch and a wolf shifter. But the magic system actually in here sounds pretty interesting because the witch character wants to become a switch, which actually means she wants to be a witch who bonds familiars to other witches. And so she ends up living together with this wolf shifter. And I have a feeling something about this wolf shifter becoming a familiar is going to happen, or something along those lines. I kind of want to say that maybe even the wolf shifter is gonna become her familiar, that she's gonna like bond him to herself or something. But like I said, these stories just don't seem to really have anything to do with autumn. They are just straight up like witchy romances. Okay, I have a few more witchy romances that I want to recommend you. First, I'm gonna mention two books that I've actually already talked about in my previous recommendations video, which I'm actually gonna leave linked below in case you're looking for some non-witchy autumn recommendations. I guess I should have mentioned that before. But these are two witchy books that I've actually already talked about in that video. So the two being A Witch's Guide to Fake Dating a Demon by Sarah Hawley. This one sounds like absolute madness and I'm really excited to be jumping into it. And the other is The Modern Girl's Guide to Magic by Lindsay Hall. Again, sounds so cute yet so chaotic that I need to dive into this one as soon as possible. So yeah, I had to get physical copies because I really want to read these two as soon as possible. The next rom-com I want to recommend you, I did also have to get my hands on a physical copy because I've just been looking forward to reading this book since I think the beginning of the year. And this one is called Go Hex Yourself by Jessica Clare. First off, I just want to show you the cover because there's so much witchy goodness going on there. Like we have candles, we have a black cat, we have some magic here, some fire magic. There's like potions and there's like the looking ball thingy, you know what I mean? So yeah, this book looks very witchy like at first glance. But it also sounds interesting. This book actually also has magic that deals with like a witch having a familiar. But in this case, the familiar is actually a human. So in the story we follow this young woman, she's called Reg Johnson. She ends up applying for a job, which at first she thinks is just a regular old job at a card game. But what the job actually ends up being is being a familiar to a very powerful witch. But she does end up accepting the job, and apparently the job has quite a few perks that she really enjoys. The only downside to being a familiar to this witch is actually dealing with her arrogant, insufferable, and maddening nephew. So apparently the main character Reggie and the nephew end up clashing, but they quickly realize they're actually gonna have to work together to solve a magical problem that they encounter. And that's pretty much all that you really get from the synopsis. It does mention like a deadly curse, so I guess the magical problem is gonna be more serious than what I initially thought. But yeah, it just sounds like it's gonna be fun. I'm starting to realize a lot of these like witchy rom-coms actually have the enemies to lovers like romance trope, which I guess is always fun. Maybe next year we could like try exploring some of the other romance tropes, like just putting the idea out there. But yeah, I definitely don't mind like an enemies to lovers romance. But when every book is like that, it does get kind of like a lot. I don't know whether this is something worth complaining about or not, but let's just move on. So yeah, that was Go Hex Yourself by Jessica Clare, and that was actually the last of the contemporary witchy rom-coms on this list. Next up, I'm just gonna tell you about the last three books, which are more of like historical fiction witchy books, I guess. The first one actually sounds so incredibly cute, and I think a lot of you guys might be interested in this one. It's called The Scandalous Confessions of Lydia Bennet, Witch by Melinda Taub. And from what I gather from the synopsis, it's basically just the story of Pride and Prejudice, but one of the sisters, so Lydia Bennet, is actually a witch, and some of the characters in the story are presented as demons, and a lot of the things that happen in Pride and Prejudice seem to be spurred on by some sort of magic. And this is kind of like a behind-the-scenes story of what exactly happened and what sort of magic was involved. It sounds like it's gonna be so adorable. And actually I was wrong. There's only one more historical witchy fiction that I wanted to recommend you. And this one is called The Witches of New York by Amy McKay. And this one I think is pretty popular. A lot of people have actually already read it. But in case you haven't heard about it, we actually follow a couple of witches who work in New York. And throughout their career, I guess, they end up taking on a young new protege. But they end up disagreeing on the best way to actually train their young protege and how to use her powers. And in the middle of their tug-of-war on trying to figure out how to teach this young girl, the young girl actually ends up disappearing. And so the two older witches are now trying to find what exactly happened to the youngest. Where did she go? Did she go by choice or did she go by force? what exactly is going on. So yeah, it sounds very interesting. The story sounds very cool. It's basically magic in New York in the 19th century when it finally like starts being safe to call yourself a witch and actually do some of these things that are associated with witchcraft. So like making potions, doing palmistry, specializing in cures and that sort of thing. And I think the youngest member, the youngest witch that they are trying to train, is actually a medium, so she can talk to ghosts and spirits and stuff like that. And yeah, that actually concludes this list of recommendations. I hope you found something on this list that actually suits your taste. One thing I'm missing is something that combines horror and witchcraft, but the horror isn't so horrific that like a wimp like me can read it. I know one book like that that's on my current TBR is actually The Witches of Bone Hill, which is again a book that I've actually already mentioned in the other recommendations video. But that one sounds like it's going to combine a little bit of witchcraft with horror. So yeah, and with that, we're actually gonna conclude this list. Definitely let me know if you have found any recommendations, if there's any witchy books you'd like to read. If you have any witchy books that you would like to add to this list, definitely let me know. I would gladly add more witchy books to my TBR always. And yeah, that's gonna be it. I hope you enjoyed watching. Thank you so much for joining me here, and I hope you're having a great day or night wherever you are. I hope you're enjoying autumn so far if you are in the part of the world that currently has autumn. Otherwise, I hope you're enjoying your spring. And I will see you in my next video. So until then, bye bye!